No one could handle the Alpha King's daughter, until an Omega Waitress did the impossible. The kingdom of Eldoria was a land of ice-kissed mountains and forests that whispered secrets to those who dared wander beneath the dark canopy. Its capital, a city of towering spires and flickering lanterns, gleamed under the pale light of a silver moon. Among all the treasures of Eldoria, none was as feared and admired as the Alpha King's daughter, Princess Seraphine. Seraphine moved through the grand hall of the palace like a shadow made of frost. Her hair, dark as midnight, fell over her shoulders in waves, and her eyes glimmered with a light that was both beautiful and terrifying. She was not cruel for the sake of cruelty, but she was untouchable. Nobles, knights, and merchants alike had tried to win her favor, only to be met with her icy glare or biting words. Rumors whispered of a curse she bore, a family legacy that brought ruin to anyone who dared to love her. Many believed the curse was why she never smiled, why her laughter was rare, and why no one could hold her attention for long. Tonight the palace was alive with excitement. A banquet had been declared to honor the visiting dignitaries from the neighboring kingdoms. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceilings, casting dancing light over the polished marble floors. Tables groaned under the weight of silver platters filled with roasted meats, fruits, and spiced breads. The air smelled of honey, roses, and burning candles. But amidst the grandeur, the most important guest had yet to appear, Seraphine herself. She descended the grand staircase, her gown a deep shade of violet, embroidered with threads of silver that caught the light with each step. The crowd fell silent, not from respect, but from awe. Every gaze turned to her. Every whisper halted mid-breath. As she walked, the nobles tried to offer bows, compliments, and carefully measured smiles. But Seraphine's sharp eyes missed nothing. One duke adjusted his cloak nervously, a merchant swallowed hard, and a knight's jaw tightened. She stopped before a group of suitors who had spent months vying for her attention. "Are you all here to prove your worth or simply to waste my time?" Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The suitors shuffled uneasily. Some had brought gifts, jeweled swords, rare wines, enchanted trinkets, but none could please her. One by one, she dismissed them with a word, a glance, or a slight laugh that cut deeper than any blade. The banquet continued, and the princess moved past the gathered crowd, her expression unreadable. Yet somewhere in the distance a pair of gentle brown eyes watched her with curiosity rather than fear. His name was Elias. He was an Omega from a small village many leagues away, sent to the capital to help at the palace as a simple waiter. His life had been ordinary until now, yet something about this moment felt extraordinary. He had heard of Seraphine's reputation, had felt the stories of her untouchable heart, and yet, when she passed by him, he did not flinch. He served the guests with careful grace, placing golden goblets and steaming plates before the nobles, yet his gaze occasionally strayed to her. He did not try to impress her. He did not bow too deeply or speak too loudly. He only observed. And in that observation, Seraphine felt something strange, a spark of interest that she had not felt for many years. Later that evening, after the banquet had ended and the guests had departed, the palace was quiet. The moon hung low, casting silver shadows through the high windows. Seraphine wandered into the gardens, her mind restless. She walked past fountains frozen in time, statues of old kings and queens, and trees whose branches curled like fingers against the night sky. And there, under a marble arch entwined with frost-kissed ivy, stood Elias. He had lingered behind, collecting dishes and tidying the long hall, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, that she had noticed him. "Why do you stay behind?" Seraphine asked, her voice soft, almost curious. Elias turned, startled but not afraid. "I suppose I just wanted to make sure everything was in order," he said. His voice was calm, steady, carrying no fear or false admiration. Seraphine studied him carefully. Most people would tremble at being alone with her, would beg for favor or forgiveness. Yet here was someone who neither feared nor flattered her. He simply existed, like a quiet flame that refused to be snuffed out. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. Her eyes glimmered, a challenge hidden in their depths. I do, he said honestly, and yet I don't feel the need to run. For a moment, the wind held its breath. Seraphine could feel her heart, which she had long believed frozen by her own curse, stir in a way she could not explain. She had never encountered someone so fearless. Fearless, yet not foolish. Curious, yet respectful. Most men do not answer me so boldly, she murmured, stepping closer, her violet gown brushing against the marble floor. Do you know what it costs to be close to me? Elias met her gaze without hesitation. I do not, he admitted. But if you are worth it, then perhaps it is a cost I am willing to face. The words hung in the air, daring, tender, and dangerous. Seraphine felt a thrill she had not felt since she was a child. A mixture of longing, fear, and hope. She wanted to pull away, to remind herself that he was a mere servant, that the curse she carried was real, that to care for anyone was to risk them losing everything. Yet some invisible force held her there, compelling her to remain close. For the first time in years she laughed, a soft, musical sound that startled her own ears. You are bold. I wonder if you understand the danger you speak of. I understand more than you think, Elias replied quietly. Sometimes the greatest danger is never trying at all. Seraphine studied him, her mind a whirlwind of thought and memory. She had been taught to trust no one, to let no one in. Her suitors had fallen like autumn leaves, crushed by ambition, jealousy, or simply their own inability to endure her. Yet Elias, he was different. Come, she said suddenly, turning toward a small hidden path in the gardens. Walk with me, but know this. One misstep, one moment of weakness, and you may regret ever meeting me. Elias followed willingly. He felt the chill in the night air, the soft crunch of frost beneath his boots, and the weight of Seraphine's gaze upon him. Each step was measured, cautious, yet full of purpose. He did not flinch at the shadows, did not hesitate at the whispers of unseen spirits that often lingered in the palace gardens. As they walked, Seraphine spoke of things she had never spoken aloud. The loneliness of being born a princess, the burden of expectations, and the shadow of the family curse. Elias listened, not with pity, but with understanding. He offered no advice, no judgment, only presence. And for Seraphine, that presence was a balm to a heart long encased in ice. She realized with a mixture of fear and wonder that she was beginning to trust him. Perhaps even, like him. Suddenly a raven black as midnight swooped low over the garden, its cry sharp and echoing. Seraphine stopped, the shadows of her past flaring in her mind. You see, she whispered, the curse does not sleep. It waits. It watches. Anyone who loves me suffers. Elias did not look away. Instead, he stepped closer. Then perhaps it is time someone faced it with you, he said. Seraphine's breath caught. Few had ever dared speak to her so boldly, and fewer still with such sincerity. The moonlight fell upon them, illuminating the strange connection that had sprung between the princess and the Omega Waitress. An impossible connection, fragile yet undeniable. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the garden around them holding its breath. Then, Seraphine spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps no one could handle me until now. Elias's heart thumped loudly in his chest. He did not know what lay ahead. Intrigues, curses, dangers, and secrets, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not run. And as the first frost of winter settled across the garden, the spark between them ignited, a spark that could either burn everything to ash or light the path to redemption. The next morning, the palace stirred to life under the soft glow of dawn. Servants hurried along marble corridors, carrying baskets of fruit, fresh linens, and trays of steaming tea. Outside, the gardens glistened with frost, and the distant mountains were dusted with silver snow. Elias moved quietly, carrying a tray filled with pastries, careful not to spill a single crumb. His hands were steady, but his mind was alive with questions. Last night's encounter with Princess Seraphine had left him restless. He could not stop thinking about her. The way her eyes had held curiosity, even admiration, and the strange vulnerability she had let slip between words. He shook his head, trying to focus on his duties. He had no right to linger on a princess, especially one so feared and untouchable. And yet, there was something about her that drew him in, like a thread pulling him into a storm he could not resist. In the grand hall, Seraphine sat alone, a scroll in her hand and her expression unreadable. She had awakened early, unable to shake the memory of Elias standing quietly in the garden, unafraid of her power. For the first time in years, she had not felt lonely, though she would never admit it aloud. When she saw Elias approaching with the tray, she raised an eyebrow. "You are early," she said, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "I thought you might want breakfast in the garden," Elias replied, bowing slightly. "The air is fresh and the sun is just rising." Seraphine's lips curved into a faint smile, almost imperceptible. "Very well, lead the way." The garden was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant song of a lone bird. Frost glittered on every branch, and the fountain at the center sparkled like crystal. Elias set the tray on a marble table, and they both sat in silence for a few moments, watching the sun paint gold across the garden. Finally, Seraphine spoke. "You do not fear me, not like the others." Elias met her gaze steadily. "Fear does not help anyone. And I do not see why I should." Her eyes flickered with surprise. Most people trembled or bowed when they spoke to her, but Elias remained calm, grounded and unwavering. That steadiness intrigued her. She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "Do you understand what it means to be close to me?" she asked softly. "I think I understand enough," he said. "Love is risky, yes, but so is life. I would rather face it than hide." For a moment, Seraphine felt something she had not felt in a long time: trust, and perhaps hope. The wind picked up rustling the frost-laden leaves, and she wondered if the palace itself could sense the shift in her heart. Their quiet morning was interrupted by a soft commotion near the palace gates. A young page ran past, his face pale with worry. Seraphine stood quickly, her instinct for control kicking in. "What is it?" she demanded. "The northern watchtower reports movement. Armed strangers at the edge of the forest," the page said, bowing nervously. They may be spies from the rival kingdom." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. The northern border had long been vulnerable, and she knew the danger well. The palace was not just a home. It was a fortress, a place where every shadow could hide a threat. Elias stood beside her, quiet but alert. "Do you want me to help?" he asked. Seraphine glanced at him, assessing his courage. Most people would have trembled or fled, yet Elias seemed steady, his heart calm but prepared. "I may need your help," she admitted, surprising even herself. Together they moved through the palace corridors, checking hidden entrances and inspecting the walls. Elias proved resourceful, noticing small details Seraphine had overlooked: a loose stone in the wall, a window left ajar, the faint smell of smoke in a distant hallway. Each time he spoke, Seraphine felt a growing sense of respect. He was no ordinary Omega. He was clever, perceptive, and brave. By midday, the palace guards had secured the gates, and the threat was contained, but the experience left a mark. Seraphine realized how much she had relied on Elias, not because she had no other options, but because his presence was steady, grounding her in ways she had never experienced. As they returned to the garden, Seraphine felt a flutter of something unfamiliar: vulnerability. She was the Alpha King's daughter, untouchable and feared. Yet here was a man who could walk beside her without faltering, without pretending, without fear. "You were remarkable today," she said quietly. Elias shrugged, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. "I only did what anyone should do, to protect those who matter." Seraphine studied him, trying to understand the courage that seemed to radiate from him. She had grown up believing that strength meant power, that loyalty was rare, and that love was dangerous. Yet Elias had shown her another kind of strength, the kind that comes from heart, not title. That evening, Seraphine returned to her private chambers, her mind restless. She paced the room, her gown trailing across the floor. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to trust someone completely, to lean on another person, to share her burdens without fear of loss. And then she remembered the curse. The curse had haunted her family for generations. Anyone who loved a royal of her blood would suffer misfortune, heartbreak, or worse. Many had tried to claim her, only to fall victim to unseen forces or cruel accidents. Seraphine had long accepted this as her fate, loneliness in exchange for power, control, and survival. Yet Elias was different. She could not explain why, but she felt certain that the curse would not touch him in the same way. Perhaps it was because he approached her with humility, or because he refused to fear her, or because his heart was pure. Still, caution burned in her chest. She could not allow herself to hope too much, for hope could be dangerous. The next few days passed in a mixture of routine and subtle discovery. Seraphine found excuses to see Elias, asking him to accompany her to the stables, help with the gardens, or run errands that required leaving the palace. Each moment together built their trust, and with trust came small revelations. Elias told her of his village, his family, and the quiet dreams he had long buried. Seraphine in turn shared stories of her childhood, of the pressure of royalty, and of the loneliness that had shaped her heart. One afternoon, as they walked along the frozen river that bordered the palace grounds, Seraphine paused. She looked at Elias, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun. "I feel something," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Something I have not felt in a long time, but I do not understand it fully. Fear and longing, hope and doubt, all mixed together." Elias nodded, his gaze steady. "Emotions are never simple, princess, but sometimes the ones that frighten us the most are the ones worth embracing." Seraphine's heart ached with the truth of his words. She had spent years armored against emotion, yet here she was, feeling things she could not name. She wanted to pull away, to remind herself that caution was necessary, but a quiet courage bloomed in her chest. Perhaps she could face the curse, the world, and even herself, if Elias remained by her side. That night, as the moon rose high over Eldoria, the palace fell into quiet slumber. Seraphine stood on her balcony staring at the distant mountains, and felt a strange sense of peace. Elias had shown her that fear could be met with bravery, that loneliness could be softened with companionship, and that even the most impossible bonds could be formed between two hearts willing to trust. But as she gazed into the night, a shadow stirred in the forest beyond the palace walls. Someone, or something, watched the princess with careful interest. Whispers of envy and malice began to twist in the wind, and the first threads of danger took shape, unseen but inevitable. The following morning brought urgent news. A group of nobles had discovered the unusual closeness between Seraphine and Elias. Rumors spread like wildfire through the palace halls, igniting jealousy, suspicion, and plotting. Some whispered that Elias was a spy, others that he was enchanted, and a few whispered the most dangerous thought of all, that he might be capable of breaking the Alpha King's daughter. Seraphine, aware of the whispers, called Elias to the gardens once more. The morning air was crisp, and frost sparkled on the marble fountains. She studied him carefully, noting the concern in his eyes. "They are talking," she said quietly. "They believe you are dangerous, or that I am. Perhaps both." Elias placed a hand over hers, gentle but firm. "Let them talk. We know the truth, and we know our hearts. That is all that matters." Seraphine felt a surge of gratitude and affection. She had long believed that trust was impossible, that connection was fleeting, and that love was too dangerous. Yet here was a man who had refused to be intimidated, who had chosen to stand by her even as the shadows grew closer. And in that moment she realized that the impossible might indeed be possible. But fate, as it often does in Eldoria, was not done. That very evening, as the palace prepared for a celebration in honor of the kingdom's founding, a figure cloaked in black slipped silently through the gates. The stranger's intentions were unknown, but one thing was certain. The bond between Seraphine and Elias would soon be tested, and the first true trial of their trust and courage was about to begin. The evening air in Eldoria's palace was crisp and heavy with anticipation. Lanterns glowed like fireflies, illuminating the cobblestone courtyards and casting long shadows across the walls. Inside, the grand hall had been transformed into a place of celebration. Silver banners fluttered, musicians tuned their instruments, and courtiers whispered in anticipation of the night's festivities. Yet despite the music and laughter, a tension lingered, subtle but sharp. Princess Seraphine felt it first, a ripple of unease along her spine. She had seen the shadow in the forest days ago, but now, closer than ever, it had entered the palace itself. The bonds she had begun to form with Elias were fragile, delicate threads that could unravel with a single wrong step. Elias, too, sensed it. As he moved among the guests serving platters with steady hands, his eyes never left Seraphine. He noticed the faint glances, the whispered conversations, the courtiers who lingered just a little too long. Danger was near, but it was not only from strangers or spies. It was from those within the palace walls, envious of their growing connection. Seraphine glided through the hall, her gown glimmering under the chandeliers. Every head turned, every whisper hushed as she passed. But even she could not ignore the tension that gripped the room. She knew that to show fear or hesitation would give power to those who wished to manipulate her, to use her curse for their own gain. She had to remain untouchable, yet her heart trembled at the thought of what was coming. Elias approached her as she paused near the fountain in the center of the hall. "They are watching," he murmured, placing a hand lightly on hers. "But we are stronger together. Remember that." Seraphine nodded, grateful for his presence. "Together," she whispered, and for a moment the weight of her title and curse seemed to lift. The festivities began in earnest. Musicians played, dancers twirled, and the aroma of roasted meats and spiced bread filled the hall. Seraphine and Elias moved among the guests with practiced ease, smiling when required, bowing when necessary, but always returning to one another in fleeting private glances that spoke of trust and unspoken understanding. Yet the shadow that had entered the palace did not wait long. A figure, masked and cloaked in midnight blue, slipped through the crowd with a grace that spoke of training and intent. No ordinary guest, no ordinary thief. This was someone who had come with purpose. Seraphine sensed the danger before Elias did, a prickling at the back of her neck, a cold brush against her skin. She froze for a heartbeat, and then the figure moved. Elias reacted instinctively, stepping in front of her. "Princess," he warned, "behind you." But Seraphine was faster. With a flick of her wrist, she summoned the power that flowed through her blood, a shimmer of shadow that rose like mist from her fingertips. The intruder faltered, caught off guard by the sudden display of magic. Elias's eyes widened. He had seen hints of her power before, in subtle ways, but this was something greater, something dangerous. And yet, despite the fear, he did not step back. He had promised to stand with her, and he would not falter now. The masked figure lunged, but Seraphine was ready. Shadow tendrils coiled around the intruder, forcing them back. Elias moved beside her, his presence steady and grounding, his calm determination giving her the courage to push further. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice cold, echoing across the hall. The intruder laughed, a low, menacing sound. "You cannot hide, princess. Your curse will destroy all who are close to you. Your fate is written in blood and shadow." Elias tightened his grip on her hand. "Not while I am here," he said firmly. Seraphine felt a surge of emotion. Fear, yes, but also determination, and something else she had not expected: hope. Elias had shown her that she did not have to face danger alone, that strength could come from trust as well as power. The intruder's eyes narrowed. With a swift movement, they drew a blade, shimmering with a faint blue light. Seraphine responded with equal speed, summoning a shield of shadow that absorbed the strike. The hall erupted in chaos. Courtiers screamed and ducked, musicians fled, and the sound of clashing metal echoed through the palace. Elias moved instinctively, deflecting attacks with his quick thinking and careful movements. He was no warrior, but his courage and presence of mind made him a formidable ally. Together he and Seraphine formed a silent, deadly rhythm, her power, his courage, weaving a protective circle around themselves. Despite their combined strength, the intruder was relentless. Every strike was calculated, every move precise. Seraphine could feel her energy waning, the familiar shadow of the curse brushing against her resolve. One mistake, and everything could be lost. Elias noticed the strain in her movements. "Focus on me," he said softly. "Not the fear, not the curse, just me." For a moment, time seemed to slow. Seraphine met his gaze, seeing the unwavering trust in his eyes. She drew strength from it, a new kind of strength she had never known. Shadow and light intertwined, her magic and his courage merging into a force that neither the intruder nor the curse could break. With a final surge, Seraphine unleashed a wave of energy that sent the intruder crashing against the far wall. The mask shattered, revealing a young noblewoman, an ambitious courtier who had sought to exploit the curse for her own gain. She lay unconscious, the hall silent except for the heavy breathing of the princess and the Omega who had stood by her side. Seraphine sank to her knees, exhaustion washing over her. Elias knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, though her body trembled with fatigue. "No, thanks to you," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly. We protected each other. For the first time in her life, Seraphine allowed herself a small, genuine smile. She realized that the bond between them was no longer fragile. It was a connection forged in fire, courage, and trust. And yet the threat of the curse remained, lurking like a shadow that would not easily be banished. In the days that followed, the palace slowly returned to normal. The courtier was quietly removed, rumors hushed, and the celebration continued as if nothing had happened. But Seraphine and Elias both knew the truth. Danger had come close, and it would not be the last. Amidst the uncertainty, their connection deepened. They walked together through the frost-kissed gardens, shared quiet meals in hidden chambers, and discovered small joys in each other's presence. Seraphine learned to laugh more freely, to trust more openly, and to embrace the possibility that love, even love touched by a curse, could exist. Elias, in turn, discovered a courage he had never known. He realized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it for someone you care about. With Seraphine by his side, he felt capable of more than he had ever imagined. Yet the curse was patient. It lingered, a subtle presence in their lives, whispering warnings and testing their resolve. Shadows flickered at the edges of Seraphine's vision, minor accidents occurred around her, and dreams of heartbreak haunted her nights. She knew the true test of their bond had not yet come. One evening, as they walked along the frozen river that bordered the palace, Seraphine paused, the moon reflected on the ice, casting silver light across the landscape. She turned to Elias, her expression serious. "There will come a day," she said softly, "when the curse will demand more than we can give, when it will try to tear us apart no matter how strong we are." Elias took her hands in his, holding them firmly. "Then we will face it together. Whatever comes, we will not falter." Seraphine felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of hope and fear. She had long believed that her life would be one of isolation, that trust and love were luxuries she could never afford. Yet here was someone willing to face the darkness with her, someone who believed in her even when the world did not. The moment was interrupted by a sudden gust of wind, carrying with it a faint, whispering voice. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. She recognized the sound. The curse was stirring, growing stronger, sensing the bond she had formed with Elias. Elias noticed the tension in her body. "What is it?" he asked. She shook her head. "It is nothing yet, but soon it will come for us." As they returned to the palace, both felt the weight of what lay ahead. Their bond had grown stronger, but the shadows were closing in. The curse was patient, and the world of Eldoria was full of those who would exploit it. The true test of their courage, trust, and love was only beginning. That night, as Seraphine lay in her chambers, she thought of Elias. She realized that she had come to rely on him not just for protection, but for comfort, for courage, for hope. And she knew that whatever the curse demanded, she would not face it alone. But the first true challenge of the curse was yet to arrive, lurking in the dark corners of the kingdom, waiting for the moment when it could strike. And when it did, both Seraphine and Elias would have to decide whether their bond was strong enough to withstand the storm that was coming. The dawn over Eldoria was gray and heavy, the sky streaked with clouds that mirrored the tension in the palace. The celebration from the previous nights had ended, but a different kind of quiet had settled. One of anticipation, fear, and an unspoken warning. The shadow of the curse had begun to move in earnest, sensing the bond that had grown between Princess Seraphine and Elias. Seraphine paced her chambers, the weight of her crown heavy on her brow. She had faced danger before, but now she could feel the curse pressing closer, relentless and patient. Every shadow in the castle seemed to watch her, every flicker of candlelight a warning. She had no illusions about what was coming. Elias stood near the window, looking out at the frost-covered gardens. His hands were clasped together, his face calm yet determined. Though he had faced threats before, he sensed the gravity of this one. He had no magic, no title, no shield beyond courage and loyalty, but he knew that he would not abandon Seraphine no matter the cost. "Elias," Seraphine said softly, turning to him. "The curse Baron had, it grows stronger. I can feel it in the walls, in the shadows. It is coming for us." Elias stepped closer, placing a hand over hers. "Then we face it together," he said firmly. "Whatever comes, we will not falter." Seraphine felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of hope and fear. She had lived her life in isolation, believing that love was too dangerous, trust too costly. Yet here was someone who had never wavered, someone who had stood by her through fear, chaos, and shadow. As the sun rose higher, a strange stillness fell over the palace. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, servants hurried with a sense of unease, and the distant mountains seemed to shimmer with unnatural light. Seraphine knew that the curse was no longer subtle. It was awake, and it would demand a trial unlike any she had faced. Elias took her hand, guiding her through the halls. "There is a way," he said quietly. "I've heard stories, legends of a ritual that can weaken the curse. It requires courage, trust, and a willingness to face the greatest fears together." Seraphine's eyes widened. "The ritual, but it is dangerous. It could consume us both if we fail." He met her gaze steadily. "Then, we succeed. We must, or all will be lost. I will not let it claim you or me, if I can help it." The princess felt a surge of emotion she could barely name. Fear, yes, but also trust, and something stronger. Love. She had never believed that such a bond could survive the curse, survive the palace, survive the shadows, but with Elias it felt possible. They moved to the central hall where ancient tapestries told stories of kings, queens, and magic long forgotten. At the center of the room, a circle of runes glimmered faintly, etched into the marble floor. This was the place of the ritual. Seraphine took a deep breath, summoning her courage. "Are you certain we can do this?" she asked softly. Elias squeezed her hand. "I am certain that together we can face anything." The ritual began. Seraphine's magic, the shadow that had always been part of her bloodline, pulsed through the runes, meeting the courage and purity in Elias's heart. Together they created a circle of energy that shimmered and shifted, weaving light and shadow into a delicate pattern. But the curse would not yield easily. A sudden gust of icy wind swept through the hall, and whispers echoed from the walls, carrying threats, warnings, and echoes of past tragedies. Seraphine felt the shadows clawing at her mind, visions of loss and heartbreak flashing before her eyes. She saw faces she had loved, friends lost, suitors destroyed, reminders of the curse's relentless power. Elias held her hand tighter. "Focus on me," he said firmly. "Not the past, not the fear, just me, just us." Seraphine closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The whispers grew louder. but she let them wash over her, refusing to surrender. The bond between them, fragile but unbreakable, anchored her. For the first time, she realized that courage was not about power alone. It was about trust, love, and the choice to face darkness together. The circle of energy around them brightened, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. Shadows swirled and recoiled, unable to break through the strength of their connection. The curse shrieked in fury, its presence pressing harder, but it could not sever what had been forged in trust and mutual courage. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed. Time seemed suspended in the ritual's glow. Finally, with a blinding pulse of light, the energy stabilized. The shadows around the hall dissipated, and the oppressive weight of the curse lifted, leaving only silence. Seraphine opened her eyes, her chest heaving with relief and wonder. Elias stood beside her, his eyes shining with the same mixture of exhaustion and triumph. They had done it. They had faced the curse together, and survived. For a moment, neither spoke. The hall was still, the ancient ruins glowing faintly in the moonlight that now streamed through the windows. The air no longer felt heavy, and the sense of threat had vanished, replaced by a quiet, fragile peace. Then Seraphine spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We did it." Elias smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We did. Together." The realization struck them both. The impossible had been possible. They had faced the curse, faced their fears, and emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as partners. Seraphine felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with magic. It was hope, trust, and love, all intertwined. In the days that followed, the palace of Eldoria transformed. The threat of the curse no longer hung over its halls, and a new sense of freedom pervaded the air. Seraphine walked with her head held high, no longer burdened by fear of what love might bring. She laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and allowed herself to be seen in ways she had never permitted before. Elias, too, was changed. He no longer felt like a simple Omega from a distant village, a servant in the palace. He had faced darkness, stood beside a princess, and proven that courage and heart could rival any power or title. His confidence grew not from pride but from the realization that trust and love could create strength stronger than fear. Their bond deepened with every shared moment. They walked through the palace gardens under the moonlight, exchanged quiet smiles across bustling halls, and whispered secrets in hidden chambers. Each glance, each touch, each shared laugh reinforced the truth that had become undeniable. They belonged together. Yet even in this newfound peace, the world of Eldoria remained vast and full of challenges. The kingdom had many threats, from rival nations to lingering shadows of magic. But Seraphine and Elias faced the future with courage, knowing that together they could withstand anything. The curse that had once defined her life now served as a reminder of the strength they had forged together, a reminder that even the darkest legacies could be overcome with trust, love, and courage. One evening, as they stood atop the palace ramparts, looking out over the snow-dusted city, Seraphine took a deep breath of the crisp night air. The lights of Eldoria twinkled below, and the mountains rose like silent guardians in the distance. Elias stood beside her, his hand brushing against hers. "It is beautiful," he said softly. Seraphine smiled, feeling a sense of completeness she had never known. "Yes," she whispered. "And it is ours, to protect, to cherish, to live in." The princess turned to him, her eyes shining. "Perhaps. No, one could handle me before. But now I believe that someone can. And that someone is you." Elias felt his heart swell with warmth. "And I will stand by you through every shadow and every storm. Always." They shared a quiet moment, the world around them falling away, leaving only the bond they had forged. The trials, the curse, the shadows. They had faced it all together and emerged stronger, their hearts intertwined in a way that neither could have imagined. As the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the ramparts, Seraphine leaned her head against Elias's shoulder. For the first time she felt free, not just from the curse, but from the fear that had shaped her life. Love, trust, and courage had triumphed over darkness, and a new chapter awaited them, bright with possibility. The palace below remained alive, the city of Eldoria breathing in quiet anticipation. But Seraphine and Elias no longer feared the world outside. They had faced the impossible, had stared into shadow, and had emerged unbroken. Together they were unstoppable, a force of light and hope in a kingdom that had long known fear. And as the first stars of night glimmered above, Seraphine whispered softly to Elias, "Our story is only beginning." He smiled, taking her hand. "Then let us write it together." The wind carried their words across the palace and the city, a promise of love, courage, and hope that would endure beyond shadows, curses, and time itself. The Alpha King's daughter, once feared and untouchable, had found her equal in Elias. Together, they were not only survivors of a dark legacy, they were a new legend, a tale of courage, trust, and the impossible made possible.